Hello everyone, happy Sunday, good afternoon, and welcome to this edition of Cab Franc du Jour live. Thank you so much to everyone who is popping in. Oh good, a few people are in, I'm waving. Thank you so much to everyone that is gonna hang out with me for a little chunk of time so that I can nerd out on a couple of wines. I won't delay too much. Oh, so many people are here. This makes me very happy. I won't delay too much in the event that people are catching this as a replay. So this will be posted to my feed after everything is all said and done. So if you have to jump off, there will be an opportunity for you to dive back in at some point later on at your convenience. Hello, everyone. Hi, Niels. Let me give you kind of a schedule rundown of what we're doing today. So we are talking about Arnaud Lambert, which I am super excited to do a little bit of a deep dive into these two wines. So we're looking at the Clos Mazurique 2021 and the Terres Rouges 2021. And when I was giving some consideration to what I wanted to talk about today, tomorrow is Cabernet Franc Day. And, I like to honor that day, even though I drink Cabernet Franc every day. It's important that we honor this day. So I wanted to do something fun. Hello, everyone. I don't even remember how to wave with the magical tools that Instagram has. And it's like they constantly are changing. So anyway, so today we're going to talk about Arnaud Lambert, which is one of my all-time favorite producers and really an important producer in terms of my own journey with regards to Cabernet Franc. So with respect to sort of how this is all going to go down, I'm going to give a bit of an overview of the Domaine and obviously each of these the regions and the communes and everything like this. And I will admit that this might get a little bit nerdy. I do have some photos and things. Sadly, Instagram has been a little bit tweaky of late. And normally there is a little button on the side of this Instagram live that allows me to show media, like photos and things like that while I'm doing the live. And it's been here and not over the course of the last couple of days. I've been trying it, restarting my phone. And anyway, suffice it to say, that button isn't there. But I do have a backup because, technology, it's always good to be prepared. So I do have my iPad here, which I'll try and show some images and maps and things like that to give some perspective as to where these two special wines are coming from. I hope some folks join in. Hey, John. Hi, Scott. Yes, Scott, tweaky. That is the word of the day. But anyway, I will, actually, I should say first, there is a little question box. It looks kind of like a speech bubble with a question mark in it. If folks have any questions, I would encourage you to put them in that box via that thing so that I can see them. Because if you're putting your question kind of in the chat thing there, I probably won't see it because it's scrolling and I'm not paying attention. So I would encourage you to put any questions you have in the little question box, and I will answer all of your questions as it relates to anything Cabernet Franc related, Loire, anywhere else in the world, the whole shebang. So without further ado, oh my gosh, there's so many amazing people hanging out here. This is awesome. Thank you so much, guys. So without further ado, first and foremost, I always like to kind of preface that I know I talk an awful lot in terms of my feed and the content that I produce about the Loire Valley. And there's a pretty darn good reason for that. In terms of France has 76% of the world's Cabernet Franc planting, 76%. And of that, about half of that is in the Loire Valley. It's actually about 15,000 hectares or so. And if you can believe it or not, there is more Cabernet Franc planted in the Loire Valley than North America, South Africa, Italy, and Hungary combined. So that's a pretty big number. that is one of the reasons why I talk about the Loire as much as I do, because that is a very important region for Cabernet Franc. But also, it is really the only region in the world that has Cabernet Franc as the primary variety for monovarietal wine. So nowhere else in the world, Cabernet Franc is the star, so to speak. So there's a lot of reason for why I talk about the Loire as much as I do. And really, I think this region deserves a little bit of love, and there's so much nuance here. Like, that's the crazy part about all of this, is that there really is so much nuance and stuff to discover with regards to the Loire Valley. And I find that some people kind of paint a broad brush. Chinon gets a lot of the limelight. They are kind of the largest region for Cabernet Franc. They are the most famous, one of the most historic regions as well. So it gets a lot of the spotlight, but there's a lot more to Cabernet Franc and the Loire, and there's a lot of nuance and a lot to discover. So my hope is that through this exercise of this project and what I do, that people are able to think about Cabernet Franc in a little bit of a different way. So that is kind of my little preamble there. So I won't delay any further. I'm going to dive into these two wines. I remember from last year that Instagram cut you off at an hour with these lives. So that is as long as this is going to go. Hopefully it doesn't go too much longer than that. But I do have a tendency to ramble a little bit when it comes to Loire Valley Cabernet Franc. And in particular, I'm dealing with two wines today, and that's a big deal. So first and foremost, for those that do not know Domaine Arnaud Lambert, this is a domain that really should be on your radar. Arnaud does not have the most traditional story, in the sense of, we often think of these French estates, many French estates and domaines, as being these, ones with very, very long histories that go back 3, 4, 5, 10 generations and things like this. And Arnaud's story is a little bit different. So it was his father that started the original Domaine Saint-Just, in 1996. And that began with actually parcels from his mother's side of the family. And it was really a small domain in the beginning. And it was when his father started the domain that Arnaud took a slightly different turn with regards to his own pursuits as an adult. And he went down to Bordeaux to pursue wine education in Montagne-Saint-Emilion. And then he went on to Dijon for a period of time after that, returning to the family domain in 2005. And what is an interesting kind of twist in the Arnaud Lambert story is that in 2009 they assumed the how do I want to phrase this? They assumed they took over essentially managing the vineyards for Château de Brézé, which is a very famous, which I'll get into a little bit in a second, but Château de Brézé is a very well-known historic chateau. They had vineyards associated with the chateau. And the Lambert family started to become the custodians of these vineyards. There's, I think, 8 clos in total that were part of Château de Brézé. And so Yves Lambert, Arnaud's father, actually signed an agreement with Château de Brézé and the owners of Château de Brézé to manage these vineyards, and it's a 25-year lease. So in 2009, Domaine Arnaud Lambert, as we know it today, really became an amalgamation of two domains. So we have the vineyards of Château de Brézé, and then we have the vineyards of Domaine Saint-Just. So all in all together, today, it's about 50 hectares of vines in total. And of that, about 20 are Cabernet Franc. The rest, of course, being Chenin Blanc. And in terms of the vineyards themselves, they are scattered across essentially 3 communes. In Saumur-Champigny, we have the communes of St-Cyr-en-Bourg, and then we have the commune of Montsoreau. And then in Saumur, we have the commune of Brézé. So that's where all of their vineyards are situated. One of the tenets of what Arnaud Lambert's approach is always about is work in the vineyard and organics in the vineyard, and the quality and the health of the soils is a really integral part of what this domain is all about, and really also Arnaud's journey with Cabernet Franc and how he's evolved as a vigneron. So they are farming organically, and they have been, what do my notes say? 2000 and I put it down here somewhere. 2009. I have a lot to cover, so I need notes to remember some of these things. So 2009, they began working organically. Now, a little bit of a twist of this story, a sad twist to the Arnaud story, is that Arnaud's father passed away unexpectedly in 2011. So you imagine Arnaud finishing up school, coming back to the Domaine in 2005. 2009, they take on another, 20 or so hectares. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Domaine doubles in size. And a mere 2 years later, Arnaud is on his own, managing this estate. And you can appreciate all of the things that might be going through one's head at that point, where you think of traditional estates in the Loire, or these more historical estates in the Loire that have generations of fathers and mothers, passing information on to their the next generation to say, okay, this is how I work this vineyard, and this is how I work this vineyard, and this is actually really good for this, but don't do it like this, because the grapes don't really like it when you treat them in this way, and this vineyard I like to do vinifications like this. So you imagine all of that accumulation of knowledge that comes from generational family businesses, and Arnaud did not have that luxury. So he's done a lot of learning on the job, if you will, as we tend to say here in North America, and as you say in English in general. But it's been really incredible to kind of learn a little bit about his journey with Cabernet Franc and how it's evolved and changed over time. Now, in terms of his Cabernet Franc, and I should have made note of his Chenin cuvées, but we're talking Cabernet Franc today, but he makes really superb Chenin Blanc as well. But in terms of his Cabernet Francs, he makes 6 Cabernet Francs red wines from his parcel. So there are 3 single vineyard Cabernet Francs from Saumur-Champigny. We have Terres Rouges, Terres Rouges, and then we have as well Monte des Roches, and then we have Clos Mazurique. And then in Brézé, in the Saumur AOP, we have Clos Mazurique, and then there's Clos Toulouse, and then as well Clos de l'Étoile. So we are focusing on Terres Rouges and Clos Mazurique today. And these are, for lack of a better term, we'll call them his entry-level wines. These are his wines that are intended to be early drinking, early consumption wines that we should be drinking more on the younger side, as opposed to a vin de garde, which is something that we would hold on to for a little bit longer and watch age. Before I get into the wines, I want to tell a little bit of a story of, I'm just making sure that everybody, I'm seeing who's here. Sorry. Before I get into the wines, I want to kind of give a bit of a background in terms of my own discovery of Arnaud and his wines and my journey with regards to this domain. So I first discovered Arnaud through Levi Dalton's podcast, I'll Drink to That. Arnaud did an interview with Levi back in, the spring of 2017. And that was, I think, the very first podcast that Levi did featuring a producer of Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley. And, this is a while ago in terms of my own journey, but it was amazing. It was like the first time I had ever heard anyone talk about Cabernet Franc, to the nerdiness that I think about this grape variety. And this is in 2017. So fast forward now to 2020, I get back to Canada. I was living in Miami for quite some time. Shout out to any of my Miami peeps that are joining me today. But I returned to Canada, and believe it or not, I should say, I listened to this podcast, and I hadn't had a chance to try any of Arnaud's wines because they were pretty hard to find. The distribution wasn't quite as strong as what it is now. So I never managed to have a drop of his wines, but yet this podcast and this person, this identity was really singular to, how I thought about Cabernet Franc. And finally, I did my first video featuring the Clos Mazurique in, I think, the spring of 2021 here in Ontario. Arnaud has a really fantastic agent, Ben Hardy, a vintage selector. Shout out to Ben for bringing in Arnaud's wines. So I was able to get my hands on some, and that really kind of then all of a sudden it was that moment of aha, okay, I'm getting this. This is amazing. So In 2022, January 2022, I had the opportunity to host a webinar for Loire Valley wines. And this was posted on the Vinexposium platform, and I was talking all about Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley. And shortly after that was posted, I got an email from Arnaud kind of acknowledging my effort and appreciating my nerdiness with regards to Cabernet Franc. And then essentially after that, I visited the Domaine for the first time in the spring of 2022. And, I was nervous because I was like, Arnaud was on this pedestal for me as a vigneron and as somebody who was obsessed with Cabernet Franc. And the coolest part about the visit, I showed up at the Domaine. We then jumped in his car and we went out to visit a couple vineyards. And we arrived at the first vineyard stop, and he pulls out a shovel out of the back of his car. And I was like, yes, we are digging in vineyards. We're going to look at soil. So I got so excited. So we literally I think I was with him for 5 hours, and we were talking about soils and the impact of soils and all this sort of stuff. So this is now finally coming kind of full circle with regards to talking about these two wines today, because I am going to do some serious soil chats. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the wines. Oh gosh, there's so many people here. This is amazing. You guys are so rad. I appreciate all of you so very much. So let's begin, shall we? So I'm going to start with Clos Mazurique as far as kind of a little bit of a backstory here with regards to Clos Mazurique. And forgive me if I'm kind of bouncing to my notes every once in a while. But so we'll start with Clos Mazurique. So this is in Brézé. Now, back the truck up. So these are two different appellations. Sorry, I tend to get ahead of myself. I get so excited. So these are two appellations here. We have Saumur Rouge, and then we have Saumur-Champigny. And I think it's really interesting to kind of compare these two appellations. Saumur-Champigny, red wine only appellation for Cabernet Franc, and of course Saumur Rouge, and Saumur as a whole covers red wines, rosé wines, white wines, sparkling wines as well. So it's a very broad appellation. I think there's 5 different appellations, within the Saumur kind of bubble. So we're talking Saumur Rouge today, and we are specifically in the commune of Brézé. Now, if that name sounds super familiar to some folks, that is for good reason. So Brézé, for many wine lovers and wine professionals, has a bit of a kind of cachet to it, if you will. And a lot of that is because of a very famous vineyard, which some of you may recognize, Clos Mazurique. And they kind of put Brézé on the map. But Brézé, before Clos Mazurique, has a very long history with regards to viticulture, and it really has to do with Château de Brézé. So Château de Brézé was this very historic estate, and they had these clos that was associated with it back in the time of, prior to the French Revolution. The wines of Château de Brézé were served in all of the courts of Versailles and other important royal family courts across Europe. And they, if you believe it or not, the sweet wines of Brézé back during this time, pre-French Revolution, they were actually trading at the same price as Château d'Yquem, which is crazy. So Brézé has this really strong history of viticulture and this strong association with very highly regarded viticulture and winemaking. Now, that all has to do with Château de Brézé. Sadly, things kind of went south in the 20th century. 19th and 20th century. I'm assuming kind of post-phylloxera things kind of just started to take a bit of a turn. So suffice it to say, the descendants of the noblemen and women of Château de Brézé that took over the domain in the 20th century basically didn't really care for it and the vineyards as much as they should have. So the vineyards fell into disrepair. And then, of course, we know the story of Arnaud and his father picking up the vineyards. Well, not literally, but starting to manage the vineyards in 2009. And that's been a really important transition. So Arnaud is now the custodian of these important sites, among which are Clos Mazurique. Now, in terms of, what else do I want to talk about here? Oh, I guess I should show some maps. This is where my handy dandy iPad is going to come in here. Thank you so much, all of you, for bearing with me on this because, Instagram wasn't cooperating for me today. So here we go. I should start by putting this into the perspective, and I hope this is going to work, because if it doesn't, I'm just going to abandon this altogether. But basically, this looks terrible, guys. So suffice it to say, this is a really terrible map, but I'm going to do my best. So here, oh dear, look at this. The two pins, those are Clos Mazurique, and they are Terres Rouges and Clos Mazurique. Up here, that's Saumur. Basically, Clos Mazurique is like 10 kilometers south of Saumur. Terres Rouges is about 5 to 6 kilometers south or so of Saumur. But essentially, we have the 6 villages of Saumur-Champigny that run along the Loire River here. And then we have Vineyard and St-Cyr-en-Bourg, which are the ones that are set back from the Loire in the southern part of the appellation. And then we have this magical commune of Brézé that is actually, on the map, you think, that should belong to Saumur-Champigny because it's really close to all those other communes that are in the southern part. But the folks of Brézé, when the Saumur-Champigny appellation was created in 1957, the vignerons of Brézé said, you know what, guys, we don't want to be part of Saumur-Champigny. We were just going to stick with being part of Saumur. And the big reason for that is that Brézé has been historically planted with more Chenin than Cabernet Franc, and there's some important viticultural reasons for this. So there's actually not as much Cabernet Franc in Brézé specifically for mostly viticultural reasons. So in terms of Brézé as a commune, we are further away from the Loire River. So in general, Brézé is cooler than other parts of Saumur-Champigny in particular, and other parts of the Loire Valley for that matter. And because Brézé is one, cooler, and number two, another interesting point about Brézé as it relates to Cabernet Franc versus Chenin is the fact that the soils across Brézé are actually a little bit shallower. So Cabernet Franc, I've talked about this before on my feed, but Cabernet Franc historically is a very drought-sensitive grape variety. So in shallower soils, if the soils aren't quite, don't have as much water retention capacity, that can be problematic for Cabernet Franc. So cooler region, Brézé, and overall, the soils are shallower. So it's not the bestest Cabernet Franc zones, but there are select terroirs that are, I think, really, really good for Cabernet Franc. And we're seeing some interesting examples of Cabernet Franc. Obviously, Arnaud makes some fantastic ones as well. But there's also some from Guy Berthaud, as well as Brandon Stater West is now making some Cabernet Franc from Brézé. Also, Domaine du Collier is another perfect example of folks that are doing some excellent red wines from this terroir. So what do we need to know about Brézé as a region? Now, like I said, this is probably going to fail me a little bit here, but I'm going to do the absolute darndest I can. So bear with me. So here we are. This is like a little geological kind of overview here. This little blob down here that I've kind of highlighted, that's Clos Mazurique. And then this little guy up here, that is Terres Rouges. So I wanted to show this because to show kind of the complexities, and this gives folks a really interesting kind of perspective on Brézé as far as its terroir. So in most of the literature as it relates to Brézé, it refers to what we call the Brézé Hill, which is, there's kind of a hill, but it's more like it's kind of like a hillock. It's almost like a ridge sort of thing. So there's you can actually kind of see here how the geology of the commune looks. But this area here, this yellow part, this is sort of the highest elevation areas in Brézé, and that's the hill that all of the vineyards follow. So we have at the northern part of the Brézé commune, Brézé, I should, French. Anyway, at the northern part here, the slopes actually tend to face a little bit more north and northeast. And then in the southern part, we have the slopes that tend to face a little bit more south, but there is quite a bit of variability in between. Brézé as a whole, as a commune, it's a really heterogeneous viticultural landscape. So it's not as easy to define as some other communes in the Loire Valley, even in Saumur-Champigny, because there are a lot of different exposures. They are different elevations that expose different terroirs, as well as I said, different slopes and different soils as well. So there's a lot of complexity to Brézé, and soil, of course, is not the be-all and end-all. I am fully aware of that fact. It's also important to know who the grower is and what sort of what kind of viticultural practices that they are doing and things like that. So while Brézé has this very historic, important reputation in terms of the Loire Valley, there's actually not a lot of vignerons that are doing quality work there. Actually, the majority of the grape varieties, the majority of the grapes are being sold to the cooperative. So there's very few independent vignerons that are working the land in Brézé properly. So now looking a little bit closer here at, that was the map I was trying to do here. Let me just double check. So in terms of soils across Brézé, because of course we are going to talk about soils today, what is the dominant kind of soil is the Middle Turonian tuffo chalk, which is this kind of lightish green kind of color here. We also have a little bit of the Upper Turonian yellow tuffo, and then here I'll show you on this this map here. This is actually a really good. This shows you the complexity of Brézé as far as terroirs are concerned. There we go. Trying to do this like, oh dear. Oh, for heaven's sakes, Allison. So yes, this shows you the complexity of Brézé. Down here, this little pin, this is soil talk. Shocker. Thank you, Scott. Yep, the big shocker there. Allison is talking about soil. So this little dude down here, that's Clos Mazurique. So what's cool about Clos Mazurique, and I'm going to lose this for a second because it's not as effective as I was hoping it would be. So Clos Mazurique, in terms of where we are in Brézé, we are actually in the southern part of Brézé. And the way this vineyard is kind of situated is a 3.7 hectare vineyard, a little clos. And it's on kind of a south to southwest facing slope. And it's a cooler spot. So we're in Brézé already, which is a cooler spot. And then we have Clos Mazurique, which is actually a cool zone in Brézé. And I would encourage folks, if you want to learn a little bit more about Brézé, the Ted Vance, the importer or the owner of the Source Imports out of California, he has a really fantastic blog post on his website, or I think it's even on the Source Imports website, that talks quite a bit about Brézé, Arnaud, Guiberto as well. And there's a fantastic map. Ah, cool. Hi, Gauthier family from Bourgogne. Thank you for joining me. So anyway, that little article or post by Ted Vance is really excellent. And it actually has a heat map of Brézé, which is really cool. And it shows kind of where the cool sites are, where the warmer sites are in Brézé. And Clos Mazurique is actually a cooler spot. So we're in Brézé, which is already cool. And then we have Clos Mazurique, which is a cool spot in Brézé. What else is important to note about this pocket here? We have 40-ish-year-old vines, south-facing slope, southern part of Brézé. We're at an average elevation of around 56 to 58 or so meters above sea level. Now, soil. Let's talk soil. So, because that's kind of what is making these two wines really interesting for me. And hopefully some of you, if you ever taste these two wines side by side, is soil. So I will get to the vinification of these two wines soon, but these two wines are vinified exactly the same. So we are just truly dealing with the terroir here, which is so incredibly sexy. So in terms of Clos Mazurique, what's important to note about where we are here is we are in the southern part of Brézé. There is a lot more clay in the topsoil in this particular lieu-dit. The French term is argile limoneuse, which basically means that there's like 40% clay content, which is good for Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc likes the moisture retention of clay. And there's about 15% sand, and then the difference is the difference is silt, which is kind of in between. Sand has sort of the largest granule size. Anyway, sand, big, clay, very fine, which is why clay sticks together, is because clay has this fineness of texture and this very, very, very small particle size. So we have this clay, mostly clay-ish topsoil. There's not a lot of it, about 50 centimeters. But what makes this vineyard interesting is there's a lot of rocks, like 50% of these stones, which occupy space in the topsoil, which is really important. And then in terms of the bedrock here, we are on the Middle Tronian Tuffo, and which I didn't know until I started preparing for this live, is that this is a different version of the Middle Tronian Tuffo called Crais Gris. I know, like, shocker. This is like, I'm having a moment because I literally was like, oh my gosh, Crais Gris, I don't know what that does or what that means. But basically it's a micaceous form of the Tronian Tuffo chalk from the Middle Tronian period. But that means it has like a higher silica minerals in it. But that's as far as I'm going to go because I don't know enough about Crais Gris to be able to kind of share. But suffice it to say, we're dealing with clay-ish, a mix of clay, topsoil. We have all these rocks, and that makes this really interesting. We have shallower topsoil as well. And what's important to note about Arnaud's approach with this wine is, and he has said this to me, but he's also said it in some interviews, is that he approaches his vinifications for this in a rather gentle way because he believes that this particular soil at Clos Mazurique would give a very powerful wine, almost too powerful for what he likes in Cabernet Franc. So he opts for a very light vinification in order to keep this wine on the fresher, early drinking, easier drinking side of things, if that hopefully computes with everyone who is there. Now, I'm going to talk about the vinification once I talk a little bit about Terres Rouges. So I hope I'm flying through this okay. I think it's been about a half an hour or so people seem to be okay. I wonder if anybody has questions. No questions yet. Come on, guys. Hit me with some questions. Anyway. Hello, everyone. Hello, Horatio. Hello. So anyway, let's talk about St-Cyr-en-Bourg. So remember, we are in Saumur here. Now we're moving to Saumur-Champigny. And basically, it was really hard to see. I'm sorry about the visuals, and Instagram is a bit of a douchebag for not giving me the button to show you these maps and things properly. But essentially, these two vineyards are, we're talking 4 kilometers as the crow flies between one another, which is pretty amazing. That's a better kind of close up here. So basically you can see, hopefully, where are we here? Oh dear. There's Clos Mazurique down there. And then Terres Rouges is kind of up here. It's basically only 4 kilometers. That's what, 2-ish miles, 2.5 miles or something like that. So not a lot of land between these two spots, but the terroirs, couldn't be more different, but similar at the same time, which is kind of interesting. So essentially, St-Cyr-en-Bourg is the commune in Saumur-Champigny that is the furthest south. So we have the 6 communes that hug the Loire River, Montsereau, Tourcoing, Parnay, Suzy-Champigny, Dampierre-sur-Loire, Saumur, and then we have Varennes, Chassé, and St-Cyr-en-Bourg in the southern part of the appellation. So St-Cyr-en-Bourg is the furthest south, and for our purposes today, this is actually one of the more easy communes to define. It's almost as if all of St-Cyr-en-Bourg is on this beautiful south-facing slope that kind of gently works its way down from Chassé and then towards Brézé. And the commune of St-Cyr-en-Bourg has really kind of 2 distinct viticultural areas. We have the western part of St-Cyr-en-Bourg, where there's a higher concentration of vineyards. And then there's a little pocket of vineyards in the eastern part of St-Cyr-en-Bourg. Let me see if I can find a good terroir map to show you this. So here is a kind of an example of the terroir in St-Cyr-en-Bourg. So we have this chunk of vineyards over here, and then we have this little chunk of vineyards kind of in the eastern part of the commune. You'll notice, as compared to, say, Brézé, where you can see there's quite a lot of diversity here in terms of the terroirs and the soils. Wow, the Vin de Saint-Nicolas-de-Bourgogne has joined this live. Thank you so much. Here in St-Cyr-en-Bourg, you can see that it's a little bit more homogeneous as far as terroirs. So what actually dominates St-Cyr-en-Bourg is the Middle Turonian tuffeau chalk and the tuffeau chalk derived soils. And here in St-Cyr-en-Bourg, this Middle Turonian tuffeau is different than the Middle Turonian tuffeau that is Clos Mazurique. Because this Middle Turonian tuffeau is the cuvées verte, which is this magical Turonian tuffeau that has a higher iron content in it. And it, that's kind of, it's a glauconitic micaceous chalk. Across St-Cyr-en-Bourg as well in terms of topsoil. So in Brézé, we have a lot of variability in terms of topsoil. There's a little bit more sand. It's a lot more kind of patchwork as far as topsoil, but generally it's a more shallow topsoil. Whereas in St-Cyr-en-Bourg, the topsoils are more silty and silty clay in terms of texture, which is really interesting. So as far as the villages of Saumur-Champigny, this is actually one of the more easier ones to talk about as far as wines, because there's a really distinct kind of consistency across the vineyards, which is really quite cool. So Terres Rouges is in the eastern part of Saumur-Champigny, and it is on a full west-facing exposure. So the west-facing exposure is really great. It gives us the benefit of the stronger afternoon sunshine, which is great for ripening. And in terms of soil, we have a little bit more topsoil here. So we were dealing with about 50 centimeters of topsoil here. This has got about 60 centimeters of like a, what's the technical term? Forgive me. Limon sablo argileux. So that means it's like 25% clay content. The French are amazing with these soil terms because it's so specific, and the percentages of these soils change as well, like in terms of like clay, silt, sand, and all of that, which is really fascinating. But so we have that 60 centimeters or so of that, and then we have a kind of a subsoil that has a little bit more of a sand silt mix, and then we finally hit that Middle Turonian tuffeau, that cuvées verte. Afterwards, this is a 2 or so hectare site. It's a warmer site than what Clos Mazurique is. The vines are on average around 45 or so years of age. What else? Warmer site. Yeah. So let's talk about vinification. I'm conscious of time. I want to get to tasting these wines because I'm thirsty. God damn it. So let's talk about the vintage quickly. 2021 is a cooler vintage, or a more classic vintage, as far as the Loire Valley is concerned for Cabernet Franc. The summer overall was cooler. The fall kind of saved the vintage in terms of the conditions. It was warm, not warmer necessarily, but certainly drier, sunnier. So the vintage was saved. And actually, I'm a huge fan of the 2021 vintage. I've tasted a lot of examples from 2021, and I think the wines are just banging. Just a very, if you love old school kind of Cabernet Franc from the Loire Valley, this is definitely a vintage for you to keep on your radar. For me, I think the wines may take a little bit more time to kind of show their true selves, because it is a cooler vintage, depending on the site, of course. But I just think they're going to have a lot of longevity, sure. So I think the wines are going to have a lot of longevity as far as lifespan is concerned. The alcohols are in that 12 to 13% range, which is really lovely. Great acidities, lower pHs. So I think these are definitely wines that will age well. Even these wines that are intended for early consumption. Now, when it comes to winemaking, question: could you say why exactly that? So concentrated. Oh, that's a loaded question that I probably could spend a whole hour attempting to. It really comes down to clay. Clay, and that's in my best kind of simple term, is that clay. So let's talk a little bit about how these soils matter. as far as the finished wine. So clay, in general, clay holds more water. It gives more power to the vine. And it contributes, so essentially that power and that energy to the plant as far as the water is concerned, from my understanding and speaking with vignerons, is that allows for greater tannin development, as if to almost like, I don't want to say pump up the tannins, but kind of in a way that it gives more power to the anthocyanins, to the phenolic profile of the versus sand, which doesn't hold as much water. So it's something to do with the clay. Now, it's generally regarded across the Loire Valley that the soils that have an impact of clay and limestone, these are the age-worthy wines. Why this is, I'm still trying to understand, but there seems to be a general consensus among most vignerons in the Loire that clay gives more power to the plant and it just creates more density to the finished wines. And for me, I tend to note that when I'm tasting Cabernet Franc. So I'm gathering all of this information from these producers. And if they say, oh, my vineyard's clay, it's got more silt, it's more sand, that all comes into the way I think about things as far as when I'm tasting the wine. So for me, clay gives more density. It gives more power, more roundness as well. Obviously, there's winemaking that comes into play here, of course. But I do find that clay gives a bit more impact as far as the finished wine. On the contrasting side, sand. Think of sand granules. Think of the lightness. Say if you're at the beach and you're picking up sand, there's a weightlessness to sand. And I do find that when I taste Cabernet Franc from more sandy soils, depending on the winemaking approach, the wines can have a certain airiness, a certain gauziness. They tend to have a little bit more lift to them and a little bit more almost aromatics, if you will. And then silt kind of falls somewhere in between. And then, of course, you have vineyards like here where neither of these vineyards is more sand or more clay. They're both kind of sort of in the middle with a little bit of, but with one having a slightly more sandy impact. So the Terres Rouges has a little bit more of a sandy silt impact, whereas this has a little bit more of a clay impact. And then we also have those stones. And Arnaud says that the stones also contribute to the degree of power that this wine could have had he kind of taken a slightly different approach to the vinifications. But in terms of the vinifications, on that point, the approach with these wines is very straightforward. So we're talking the majority of the fruit was only macerated on skins for about 8 days, if you can believe it. And there would have only been about pump overs just in the first 3 days to kind of keep things moving. You're very welcome. And I'm sorry, that was not the best explanation. But in terms of the vinification, 8 days for the majority of the fruit, and then there was a small portion for both of these wines that was macerated for 3 weeks. And then the only difference is all with indigenous yeast. It's all whole berry. It's all in terms of free run versus press wine. I put this in here, 25 to 30% press wine is used in the finished blend. So we have quite a lot of free run juice here as well. The grapes are indeed hand-picked, Tony. Thank you. And then in terms of the major difference is the Clos Mazurique is in stainless and the Terres Rouges is in concrete. And when I so candidly asked Arnaud why he chose stainless versus concrete for the two wines, he simply said, "I do not have enough concrete." And that is Arnaud in a nutshell, because that is just the type of guy he is. The most humble and real winemakers and transparent people on the planet. So you know what? If I had more concrete, maybe I'd use more concrete, but I don't have enough concrete, so I have to use stainless too. So anyway, Lars, very nice. Richard, very nice for you to jump in. So we're talking very neutral winemaking. I'm like conscious of time. That was dangerous. Conscious of time here because I want to get to tasting these wines. So let me dive in because gosh darn it, it's Sunday. I deserve it. So let's talk a little bit about the Clos Mazurique. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun. Okay, no questions. That's fine. Gosh, there's so many wonderful people hanging out. Thank you so much, everyone. So let's talk about Clos Mazurique. So this is the cuvée that I have the most experience with. And it shows very consistently from vintage to vintage. And what's important to note off the top is there's instantly something that feels a bit cooler about this wine. Obviously, we're dealing with a cool vintage, cool site, but there is an kind of an air of coolness about this wine in terms of the overall fragrance. It leans more red fruited. It does have a slightly savory herbal profile to it, but it's also very bright, has a nice translucency or a crystalline kind of profile to the nose. And overall, I would say the fruit profile leans in that crunchy, sweet tart spectrum. There's some nice red raspberries here, red currant, a little bit of perhaps, I know Niels is watching. There's a little lingonberry on this as well. Perhaps a little bit of cranberry. And then there's, in terms of the herbal profile, this is very classic, but it leans a little bit more in that cooler spectrum. So I'm getting like a touch of mint here. There's a little bit of like a lemon thyme thing going on. And you immediately smell acidity, like you smell this freshness with the wine, which is really lovely. And there's also a little bit of an underlying spiciness to the nose. I often, with regards to Cabernet Franc, I often get more spice on the palate, but this leads with a nice spiciness that Laura says, yeah, these are some of the best value wines. Definitely agree with you, Lars, on that one. Arnaud, just the wines across the board are fantastic. But I wanted to talk about these two because they are the most accessible in terms of production. I think the production on the Clos Mazurique is around 30,000 bottles a year. The Terres Rouges is around 40,000 bottles per year. In the US, this retails for max, I think, $25. US, it's kind of in that $20 to $25 range, I'm sure, in Canada, as well as parts of Europe as well. So these are very accessible wines. And I think that's one of the great things that Cabernet Franc has going for it right now with regards to, the world of wine at the moment. Now let me get tasting. So I tasted these wines earlier in the interest of time. In terms of the palate, what is really distinctive about this wine is how the acid profile hits with this wine. And remember, there's a more of a tufo impact, so we're getting to the tufo within 50 centimeters. It's not a lot of depth of the topsoil. So I do get a bit of a tufo kind of impact. And what that is doing is creating... well, first, let me talk about the acidity. I'm getting ahead of myself. In terms of the acidity is really bright. It's kind of crunchy. It has a very lively profile to it. And the tannins are so fine. Like they're silky in the mouth. They have a satiny kind of silky satin sort of texture, but very, very fine. It is almost as if you could visualize, I don't know if anybody has had the opportunity to take a pottery class, for example, but if you can visualize the feel of pottery clay on a wheel and that texture, and you can sense the fine grains of the clay. That's kind of what you're getting here with regards to these tannins. You can almost feel that fineness. And on top of that, there is this kind of almost like a wet stone mineral kind of element to this wine, which I think is really, really beautiful. It's as if you're, it's like springtime, the snow is starting to melt, and you're like looking at a little babbling brook, and the cold water is kind of rippling over the round stones in the brook or the creek. And that's kind of what this wine is doing as far as the profile is concerned. Gosh, it's so tasty. Wow. So what's interesting about the acid profile on this wine is that sometimes with Cabernet Franc, the acid hits me like instantly. And then there's other times where it's like the acid kind of comes in kind of later. And with this wine in particular, it's like the acid hits you right out of the gate. So it's like you feel the wine in your mouth and you almost have to like either swallow it or spit it out, because like the acid feels really kind of intense at the beginning. But what is interesting is it presents initially on the palate as if it's going to be this light, easy, juicy wine, which it is. However, it also grows in terms of the finish of the wine. So towards the back end of the middle palate and the finish of the wine, it's like the wine kind of crescendos. So it gains weight, it gains density, and a bit more power in a kind of a sneaky sort of way at the back end of the palate, which is really, really interesting. One of the things that I'd like to note about Arnaud's approach with regards to Cabernet Franc, and a word that we don't really use in English to the same degree that the French do, is sucrocity, which is this sensation of sweetness on the palate. And this is one of sort of the key pillars of Arnaud's approach with Cabernet Franc, is purity, precision, and this sucrosity, and trying to maintain a beautiful sweetness to the middle palate experience in terms of the finished wine. And the Clos Mazurique does this without a doubt. It has this beautiful juiciness, and then there's this beautiful kind of sweet fruit core in the middle. But I think this sucrosity kind of notion is better exemplified in the Terres Rouges. I'm going to switch out glasses here for my Terres Rouges glass. And thank you, Lydia, for your comments. Appreciate it. So in terms of the Terres Rouges, now here we are dealing with concrete in terms of the vessel versus stainless steel for the Clos Mazurique. But here, as I said, we've got slightly deeper soils. We have this craie verte, which is this glauconitic micaceous chalk, which I don't know, I don't have a lot of concrete data as far as what that means, other than my own tasting experience. But for me, these wines that are on this craie verte tend to have a bit more of a spicy impact, but also a bit more generosity to the palate. So in terms of the nose on this wine, this is completely different than the Clos Mazurique. It's a little bit more, a little bit darker fruited. There's a bit more of a brambly undertone, a bit more of a foresty kind of undertone. The fruit profile is still that sweet tart. There's a bit more Bing cherry. There's a black raspberry note. The pyrazines hit totally differently. Did I even talk about spice on the Clos Mazurique? I didn't. I'll go back to the spice. I'm so conscientious of time. So in terms of the pyrazines for the Terres Rouges, the Terres Rouges leans a little bit more in those kind of sturdy herbs, things like rosemary. There's a bit more cedar leaves, cedar wood. The spice profile on the Terres Rouges is a little bit more in that baking spice ballpark. Things like cardamom, nutmeg, a little bit of clove as well. And yeah, it's overall, you sense there's a certain generosity to the nose. So there's a little bit more depth here, whereas this kind of danced a little bit more in terms of the fineness of the nose. This has a little bit more depth to the nose. So what is really interesting about the Terres Rouges versus the Clos Mazurique is the acidity on the Terres Rouges hits so much differently. So the Clos Mazurique acidity hits in this like instant kind of like, it's in your mouth, you feel like this instant salivation, your cheeks are buzzing. That's kind of what the acidity does. With the Terres Rouges, it's a little bit different. So the acidity kind of comes in at the end. So you feel the wine in your mouth and there's this generosity of fruit. There's this enveloping tannin structure. And you're thinking to yourself, maybe this is lower acidity. But then the acidity kind of creeps in at the finish. So the wine leaves your mouth and then it's like you can feel your cheeks start to salivate after the wine has kind of left your mouth, which I love because it creates this instant desire to want to jump back into the glass because your cheeks are salivating and you're like, I want more of that. And that's one of the things that I think is really distinctive about these two wines is how the acid profile hits as well as the tannin. So here in the Clos Mazurique, we have these, I'm like trying to get these things in camera without knocking shit over because that would happen. So the Clos Mazurique has this fineness of tannins, this linear, more, there's a density to it, but it's also linear and lean as well. Whereas the Terres Rouges has a certain generosity to the mouth. There's that sucrosity thing coming through. So there's this nugget of beautiful sweetness. It's not true sweetness, but there's this perception of sweetness on the palate. And we should really consider using that word a bit more often in terms of in English, but the French use it quite a bit. And I find that is a very difficult thing to achieve with regards to Cabernet Franc, is capturing that middle palate deliciousness, that sucrosity, that fruit in the middle. That is not an easy thing to capture. It tends to be a bit elusive. And if you work the fruit a little bit too much, there's a lot of factors at play there, but it is definitely one that can easily disappear, either with too much extractions. It can disappear with very warm ferments. It can disappear sometimes with a little bit too much wood. I find that sometimes the wood can dry out that middle a little bit. But this Terres Rouges has that beautiful sweet core. It's almost reminiscent of like, there's like a strawberry raspberry jam kind of middle to the wine. It's delicious. In terms of I didn't talk a little bit about the spice profile on the Clos Mazurique because it's spicy on the nose, but it's a different spice. This is kind of more in that baking spice-ish ballpark, whereas the Clos Mazurique, for me, one of the first things I noted on this was sumac. I'm not sure if too many folks cook with sumac or are familiar with wild sumac that grows. It grows in Europe. I know it grows here in North America, particularly in cooler climates. But sumac, it has this kind of red lemon kind of note to it. So I'm getting a little bit of sumac on the Clos Mazurique, which I think is really interesting. There's also a little bit of like a musky white pepper thing going on, which I really, really dig. Delicious. There's some questions. Andrew asks, is the maceration time dictated by tasting for an amount of desired extraction? He's looking for numbers. Oh, that's a very good question, Andrew. In terms of Arnaud's approach, he does not look at... He's not a real numbers guy as far as bricks and sugar and alcohols and things like this. It's pure tasting of the berries and tasting of the berries kind of in advance of fermentation to get a sense of how phenolically mature the fruit is. But in terms of the extractions, and forgive me if I don't articulate this, I know you make wine, and if I don't articulate it properly, send me a DM and we can talk about it a bit more. But what Arnaud is trying to do with regards to these extractives, and I should note that his approach has really evolved dramatically over the last 15 years that he's been making wine, and he's just slowly over time dialed way back on the extractions because he's not trying to get a powerful wine. So it's kind of really by feel. He's not measuring things. He's not checking things. He just knows now. So the important thing to note about Arnaud is that he has spent his whole career thus far, and he's a young guy, so he's got lots of life hopefully left in him to keep learning. But he has really focused on the health of his soils and understanding what the soils bring to the fruit in order to best convey that site in the finished wine and convey that place in the finished wine. So he's really taking, it's really about understanding the vineyard. His approach to Clos Mazurique has changed quite a lot over the years. And for example, in 2020, he did a lot more extractions, and he told me that when I was there at the Domaine in May of 22, he said, yeah, the wine is great, but it'll be better in 5 years. And he's like, I'm not doing that again, because he just took it a little bit too far as those extractions are concerned. And yes, the finished wine is good, but he wants this wine to be really accessible, juicy, fresh, easy drinking in its youth, just as Terres Rouges. So he's taking a different approach with his other Cabernet Francs, Clos Mouton, for example, Clos de l'Étoile. He's doing some more extractions. There's some wood aging involved with those. But it really comes down to him understanding kind of just what the vineyard gives. And I know that sounds a little bit wishy-washy for some folks that are, a bit more analytical in terms of how they look at winemaking. But that's really, it's all about feel and kind of that gut instinct. And, Arnaud is very humble in that way, and I really appreciate speaking with him as a winemaker, because he is very, he's not shy to share, his mistakes and things that he would do differently. And he's constantly learning, and he's very humble in that way. And I really appreciate our conversations because I learn so much because he's learning at the same time. So it's kind of like this wonderful exchange of information with regards to Cabernet Franc. And, it's a real thrill to taste with winemakers like that are just as curious as you are to learn and to get better and to improve. I know Niels had a question. Whole berry, yes, Niels, this is whole berry fermentation and destemmed. There's very little whole cluster going on in the Loire Valley. You're starting to see it appear more in warm vintages, but not terribly consistent. I'm not going to indulge in my opinions on whole cluster and Cabernet Franc because it could be a bit divisive, but I appreciate the classic approach in the Loire Valley to destemming and leaving the berries whole as far as the fermentations are concerned. So there's no crushing of the fruit, generally speaking. I'm painting a broad brush here, but generally speaking, there's no crushing across the Loire as far as fruit is concerned. And to your question about alcohols, both of these are 13% ABV. And Arnaud harvests at, he's seeking phenolic maturity is kind of the goal in terms of the profile. So he's not letting the fruit hang too long or kind of too past that he's trying to pick at that optimal window, which is tough for Cabernet Franc. It's a very site sensitive grape variety, and Arnaud gets this, and I totally get that. You're welcome, Niels. And I get that this grape is very site sensitive, and it has the capacity to express place. And that's one of the reasons why I love this grape so very much, is that I think in the right hands, with the right degree of passion and enthusiasm and care in the vineyard and in the cellar, you can truly see quite clearly where the wine is coming from with regards to the finished wine. I feel like Instagram is going to tell me imminently that I'm running out of time here because it's been, it's got to be close to an hour by now. That flies by when you're talking, and I didn't even talk about half the stuff that's in my main notes on. But anyway, there weren't as many questions today as there often is. But just to kind of put a bow on this, in case I get the signal from Instagram that I've been, I've got 2 minutes left or something. But just to put a bow on this, Arnaud, if you're not familiar with the wines from Arnaud Lambert, these are definitely ones to seek out. As I said, these two wines in particular are extremely accessible from a price point standpoint. And if you can find them and try to taste them side by side, hopefully it would give you some insights into the breadth of this wonderful grape variety as far as what it's capable of, especially as an unoaked example. This is with stainless steel. This is in concrete. The vinifications, we're not talking long extractions here, 8 days for the majority of the fruit for both of these wines. So these wines are all about purity. They're about freshness. They're about that fruit profile. They're about the, they're precise wines. And there is a certain degree of, there's a focus to the wines. You sense that there is a lot of strong kind of know-how going into and confidence, quiet confidence, if you will, going into the winemaking for these wines. And they're truly beautiful across the board in terms of what Arnaud is doing with Cabernet Franc and with Chenin to a certain extent. But in terms of his style, they definitely lean more in that clean, concise, pure, straight. There's not a lot of bells and whistles here. It's truly about the grape and the place, which I really, really appreciate. And I see that there's another question. Good example of how Saumur and Saumur-Champigny can be similar, can be different, or neither. Oh, yeah, Sasha, that's a loaded question. I think it is a great example of how Cabernet Franc is different everywhere, and how it is I think they are two very good representations of both places, to be very honest. This is showing a bit cooler. This is showing a little bit warmer, which Saumur-Champigny is. It's a warmer site overall. The soils are a little bit warmer. But I don't know. That's a tough one answer. I think what this just demonstrates is how different Cabernet Franc can express itself in terms of site. And I'm trying to dig deep into sites and understand profiles and these sorts of things, and to give people a better guidebook, if you will, and there will be, a more physical version of that at some point. But for now, you all have to deal with my ramblings in videos and more writing in the future. But I am working on trying to compile these thoughts and compile my ideas as far as what we can expect from certain wines and what they, how to enjoy them and how to best experience them and what to pair them with. We haven't even talked about food with regards to these two wines, but these are two exceptional food wines. The Clos Mazurique, instantly, if you're a fan of duck, this is definitely a duck wine. Wink, wink to Sasha. This is a duck wine for sure in terms of the texture, that fineness of texture. I think would be perfect with some sort of duck kind of preparation. I also think it would be really good with like a beef tartare or something like that, like any sort of raw beef preparation, or even like a carpaccio or something like this. I think this would also be really, really lovely. I'm a big fan of beef tartare. I never make it at home because it's like one of those things that I eat at restaurants, but I think this would be a great beef tartare wine. Now this wine, has such Moorish kind of impact, if that makes sense to folks. Like there's something about it that instantly makes you kind of go, I want to dive back in. So to me, the Terres Rouges kind of shows this little bit more. There's a little bit more of like a homey, cozy, like easy, kind of I'm in my PJs on the couch and kind of chilling mode. Like there's something about it that feels really friendly and really approachable. Whereas this is a little bit more, there's a certain degree of refinement to the Clos Mazurique, which I think lends itself, it has just this different personality altogether. Whereas the Terres Rouges has just this generous, it's like a big hug in wine form. And in terms of what I would pair this with, this is an easy wine, I think, for pairings, and you could do a lot with it. Like this would be fine with a roast chicken. This would be great with, hold on. Like there's great acidity on this. It would be fantastic with even something super, super simple, like like I said, roast chicken, or a simple seared steak with all the fun trimmings. You could even have this with sausages and lentils, really classic French bistro brasserie kind of dish. It would be great with pizza, honestly. Like this is, if it's Friday night and I'm having pizza, I would probably be opening this. If it's Saturday night and I'm making seared duck breast or duck confit or something a little bit more fancy, I might go for this. I'm surprised. Maybe Instagram's changed its thing. I've been expecting it to say, sorry, your time is up. And it hasn't done that. So anyway, I don't want to, I know this has gone at least an hour, and I don't want to, overstay my welcome here on Instagram. But does anybody have any questions about anything? I feel like I blazed through this stuff. No questions? You guys are all just like happy to hear me ramble. So in conclusion, I guess, there's probably lots more I could say on these wines, but I think I've covered, gosh, I hope the majority of the important things with these two wines. And as I said, I would encourage all of you to track these down, taste them, experience them. Give me your thoughts on what you think about these two wines. But I should as a point of conclusion, I'll DM you about terroir maps. You betcha. We will talk about terroir maps. And yes, the book is in progress, so no fret there. No timeline, but it's in progress every day. It's in progress. But anyway, just as a final note, the whole reason why I am doing this today is because tomorrow is Cabernet Franc Day, December 4th. And that is our day to really give this grape some love. So I would encourage all of you to open a bottle of Cabernet Franc, to share in how awesome this humble little grape is, because it's pretty freaking fantastic. And also, as a kind of a final thought, I guess, if you will, tomorrow, hi Joshua, thank you so much for jumping in. Tomorrow is the Franc Chronicles, I should say. Franc Chronicles turns 3 tomorrow, which is very exciting. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to everyone who continues to support this effort, and me, and endure my quizzes and the nerdiness, and some of my rambles with regards to this grape variety. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of you. So I'm so truly grateful for all of the enthusiasm and support. And there's lots of exciting, I'm going to get all like wispy eyed here. There's lots of exciting things to come in 2024. I will be launching a newsletter officially in January, which will give me an opportunity to do some more writing, and because I'm tasting so many wines and I don't have nearly as much space to put them as far as stories and posts and things like this. So I'm going to start writing. So if you like to hear me more, I will be sure to send, I'll be putting up a link at some point for folks to sign up for the newsletter, which will be a weekly newsletter where I'll talk about more Cab Franc stuff, and it'll include wine specific recommendations, but also profiles of producers and sites and all kinds of nerdy stuff, maybe some interviews and things like this. So there is so much to look forward to, and I'm just so grateful for everyone for all of your support over the last nearly 3 years and counting. So if there's no other questions, I will leave everyone to their Sunday. It's getting dark here because it's December now, and it's sad, but anyway, that is kind of the deal at the moment. So as a final thought, go out and buy these wines because they're delicious, and support Cab Franc in general, because it's I'll say it, it's a fucking amazing grape, and it deserves more love. So thank you so much to everyone that tuned in to jump on. And if you have any specific questions with regards to, I feel like I didn't cover all the things that I wanted to, but if you have specific questions with regards to Cabernet Franc, my door is always open. And thank you, Andrew. You're amazing. I would encourage you to shoot me a DM if you ever have any questions or thoughts, or, I glazed over something that you want to dive more into. It would be a pleasure to chat with you folks. So I will, I think I shall leave it at that. I hope everyone has a really fabulous Sunday, and what should you drink while watching the 49ers best the Eagles? Well, if the 49ers are besting the Eagles, then you should be drinking something from California. In fact, there's probably a lot of really rad Cabernet Francs coming from Napa, or even Sonoma, perhaps, might be the better choice, or maybe Paso Robles. But let's, if the Niners are going to win, then certainly pick a Californian Cabernet Franc. So anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for jumping in. And as always, I will be back with more content soon, another wine, and lots more Cab Franc nerdiness to come. So thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.